brands were kind of manipulating those in different ways, getting people to provide reviews for different reasons and things like this. And Shopify knew it, and they just cut a whole bunch of reviews. I mean, thousands of reviews for some brands. We have this terminology as like close to cash. When you got something in your cart, you're close to cash, right? That person's going to spend the money. It's just a matter of where they're spending it. You or someone else. They're interested in shopping. And that first message is always about, let me tell you about the brand, because that's how I'm going to build a connection with you.
Hello everyone, my name is Maciej Nowak and welcome to this to Know podcast where we discuss all things related to building great websites. Today we are talking email, retail, economics and a bit of a crystal ball gazing with Greg Zakowicz, senior e-commerce expert at Omnisend and a true veteran of the inbox. Greg has spent 15 years helping shops and agencies turn insights into revenue, so I asked him to unpack the real-life numbers behind email still converts and how that changes when the economy wobbles. We start with the recent tariff stuff. What brands actually saw on the dashboard, why consumers are still hunting for value over price, and how Q4 planning now begins in August. From there, Greg walks us through the 3 automations every store and agency should launch this week, which is Welcome, Product Browse, and Cart Recovery, plus a simple customer non-customer split that fixes most blast and try mistakes. We also dig into whether to freeze or double at spend when budgets tighten, moving D2C tactics like visual emails into B2B streams, and how agent-style AI search will change list building, reviews, and discoverability. If email feels old school, this conversation might change your mind and your margins. If you want to keep learning more about building great websites, please subscribe to our newsletter at awesomestudio.com/newsletter. This is osomstudio.com/newsletter. If you are watching this on YouTube, give us a thumb and subscribe to our channel. This means a world to us. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Greg Zakowicz.
Hey everyone, it's good to have you here. We're glad you decided to tune in for this episode of the Awesome to Know podcast.
Hi Greg, thank you for joining the pod.
Maciej, pleasure to be here. I'm excited to talk about all the stuff we're going to talk about today because it's a passion of mine. So we're going to get into it. We're probably getting on tangents, which I'll take you on. But this is going to be awesome. So thanks for having me.
Very good. I really like the energy. All right, so taking that energy, let's start with something heavy. So we are past a couple of weeks since all of the tariffs chaos happened, and it was not one day event. It was a couple of weeks, and now it was a couple of weeks ago. Things settled down a little bit, but I'm curious. What have you seen throughout that time of huge uncertainty? What's going to happen, and a little bit like businesses are a little bit freezing in terms of decisions. So I'm curious, what did you see behind the scenes on clients' accounts or trends, or what transpired to you?
Yeah, it's a really good question because you're right, we're still in the middle of it, and but you're right, it is settling down. Probably based on where you live, it's settling down a little bit. So the early onset was, from a consumer standpoint and maybe from a retail standpoint, was a little bit of panic. It was, what does this mean? How does this going to impact my prices? How does this impact how I deal with supply chain if you're a business? And there were really no answers, right? So it was kind of like, hey, we'll slap all these tariffs on in one blanket move. You guys figure it out, and then we'll figure it out as you figure it out. And then you got to figure it out a little bit more as we react to it. So ultimately, what that caused was, from a consumer standpoint, a lot of uncertainty. I said panic before, and I wouldn't say panic, but there was a lot of concern from consumers. And we started to see this, right? Part of that concern is we've been dealing with inflation since COVID. So, the reports and everything will say, well, inflation has come down. It's come down from where it was, which was really, really high. It's still high. I feel when I go to the grocery store, I feel when I buy my kids' clothes. And the challenge there is, for the last 18 plus months, we've been seeing consumers kind of become more value focused. Here in the States, we've seen it overseas as well, UK, wherever you want to be. I'm obviously gearing towards the States because I live here. But there was a lot of value-focused purchasing. That's still the case. So what that means from a consumer standpoint is a little more specific with their purchases, intentional. So people would trade down brand names. So you think about groceries, you get an Oreo or something. Maybe you get the store version of the Oreos if the taste is good enough for you, right? You make those trade-offs
Not
and
too
you trade
far
down.
away.
It could be Nikes to something else, right? And that's been pretty persistent. We still see that today. So from a retail standpoint, if you can't compete on price, you're kind of losing out. Then you throw in tariffs and say, okay, my costs are going up. I can't compete on price already. I'm not a huge retailer like Walmart or someone that has buying power to it. And then you're going to lose on price a little bit more. And that really has focused from a brand standpoint is you need to focus on value, and value doesn't have to be price all the time. It can be speed and cost of shipping, return policies, customer service, whatever it might be, but you've got to really promote the value. So it's starting to settle down a bit now, but we're coming up on Q4 sooner than people want to realize. And I think that's when we're going to start to see some of those inventory challenges. If you're a retailer, some of those price points come up a little bit. And I think that's kind of going to be the bellwether a little bit. So there's a lot of different things that go into this. It's kind of a long but high level view of it. But the value focused purchasing, it's not going anywhere, and it hasn't been going anywhere. And I still think we're going to be seeing that over as people get used to it. We're going to see that come up and be persistent. My guess is probably for the next 12 months. And if things go nicely, tariffs kind of smooth out, companies adjust, everything happens here. I think we'll probably see that come back. People start splurging a little bit more. But, that value focused stuff is really important now. But it's good for brands, right? Brands for a long time have forgotten about it. Whether you're selling product, whether you're a services company, whether you're creating content for something, trying to sell, you know, a program or educational tool. A lot of people have forgotten about the value of it and they've been focused on the transactional side. And I think it's kind of a good reset for people across the board if you're selling something to really focus on the value now.
Mhm. And you mentioned the Q4 coming up very soon. Why is this so important? Is it because of closing year and reporting of sales at the end of the year and everything like this, or is it more just Christmas, Black Friday stuff kind of thing?
Well, I think it starts with retail, but it carries over to businesses as well, right? So from a retail standpoint, it's obvious. It's the biggest time of year. People are shopping for Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever holiday they're doing it. But also people feel good generally. They feel good around that time. They want to spend a little bit more, whether it's on gifts or to treat themselves. It's been a long year. It's kind of that reset. Let's wind down, enjoy things. Last year, we kind of saw that muted a little bit. Sales were still up from a retail standpoint, but we saw consolidation. This goes into the value, right? So value focused decision. I'm spending more of my dollars with single retailers versus 20 different retailers. Maybe I go to 10, but I'm spending more with those 10, right? Because I'm getting the value. From a business standpoint, if you're a B2B company, you're selling some sort of product or services, it's kind of the same thing. You have a lot of companies that will start to look at their tech stack at the end of the year. Contracts might be coming up, so they're looking at those type of things. If you're just like a services company, it's also a time where people look to just kind of reset. Okay, if the costs are coming down, I'm spending a lot here. It's kind of it's that time to reset a little bit. But now they're starting to look at, maybe it's not a tech stack, but they're looking at, okay, do I need this product? Do I need this service next year? Do I need to downgrade that service? And they start to take stock of what they have and do that inventory a little bit. But I think that carryover because the mindset's already there from a consumer standpoint. Everyone's shopping if they celebrate something around the holidays. But that does trickle down to a business side as well. But you also have a lot of contracts that just come up in the year. So they start to plan that next year. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach. Business, obviously, you're not probably going gangbusters Q4, but it's kind of that reset area. And you want to be ready to push the gas pedal down come January 1st.
And also, September, October are famous for, budget planning months, right? And this is on the edge of like the third and fourth quarter, and setting the budget for the next year is something that's done every fourth quarter, right? for businesses like bigger organizations.
That's true. And if they're still going through that evaluation process, say, okay, this is our budget going into next year, and they start that evaluation process. So October, November, December, that's when you want to start planting the seeds. You want to start making those connections, really, again, driving home that value, whether it's on social media, whether it's through email, whether it's a combination of all these things, paid search, right? We want to promote that value to get people in there and be like, okay, I'm going to consider switching here. I'm going to look for the best value possible. And then we start to see those value promotions come up. And again, that could be customer service. If you're B2B, obviously customer service can be huge. Touch points, personal account manager, not personal account manager, right? Services offered. And can they scale with you? If you're planning on growing, can they work with you? If you sink down a little bit without kind of holding your hand to the fire. But those things all start before the actual sales process starts.
Very good you mentioned that, because I wanted to dig here a little bit more, because to get that value across whatever, like across the website or in a physical store, you have to get to these people right earlier, so that you maybe educate, maybe you do some marketing for them. But so what I wanted to ask is that, in light of this slight slowdown or uncertainty, what might happen is that people, like for example, we had a couple of clients who were reluctant to do anything. This is one approach, and the other approach I've heard, let's say, can be, let's double down on the marketing spend. So that one approach, one school says, okay, freeze marketing spend in times of uncertainty. The other school says, double down because you want to get ahead of the race when dust settles. You are further in the race. You have a handicap. How do you see this? Can you confirm or disprove one of the schools? Like what do you see from behind the scenes? What happened during that time, if you have any data on it?
It's tough because I don't look at anyone's balance book, so it's hard for me to be like, hey, they probably should have spent here. But I can always spend someone else's money pretty easily. So that's the other thing. I think my general rule as a starting point is you got to move forward, keep moving forward. If you kind of stay stuck in the mud, someone's going to move forward. Someone's going to be doubling down on the marketing spend, and you're going to be a step behind at that point. Now, this is kind of where the obvious part comes up, but when times are good, people have and businesses have a tendency to be like, okay, we'll throw some money on Facebook, we'll throw some money on LinkedIn ads, we'll throw some money on paid search, and they're not really tracking it overly close. They're like, okay, this fits, this is the cost per click, and it's within our range, and we're good, and they don't think about optimizing. And then when times become tough or challenging or uncertain, they're like, do I need to spend that much, when they haven't been either testing or really being critical of things when times are good. And that's where staying on top of your ad spend, I think, is more important than anything. I have no problem with doubling down on it. Are you doubling down on the right places, right? Hey, we promote on paid search, we do meta ads, we do TikTok, and we do YouTube ads. Well, are all of those performing exceptionally well for you? Maybe not, but you've got to be tracking it. Maybe you want to dial back on the TikTok or dial back on the Meta. Everyone keeps telling me Meta ads are still great. They still love them, right? So, maybe that's the place you want to go. Maybe paid searches become more complex or just not as efficient because you have people using, GPT and Perplexity to start doing some searches. So you're kind of refining down a little bit. I think just knowing where you're getting your value from, I think that's the most important part. So I have no problem doubling down on social media, doubling down on email marketing, which, by the way, is a lot cheaper in a lot of respects. And that's probably where your automation comes in a little bit more. You get better bang for your buck, and you could also reduce your paid retargeting costs. But just knowing your numbers, right? That's going to be the critical part of it, in my opinion.
It seems that it's harder to do when times are good, because there are less incentives to be diligent in the spend. And when times are hard, then you are maybe overreacting, over optimizing, and not having the data from better times. It's like being a little bit lazy when the times are good, which strips you down from, like, you don't have the tools when the times are bad, so it's more difficult and you do mistakes. But obviously, in theory, everything looks easy. But when you have to apply this is different thing. And I'm saying this because there's also that very popular saying that you don't know, half of the marketing is not working. You just don't know which half of
Yeah,
the
which
market
half?
of yeah. So like it's like always difficult thing, but yeah.
And it's natural. So that's natural tendency, right? When times are good, you can spend the extra money on whatever marketing channels you want, because you want to focus on growing other areas of your business and in refining those things, right? It's the operational side, it's the customer support side, it's the level of service you're providing, whatever it might be there. You don't think about it. So it's human nature, and I don't fault anyone for doing it. You just want to focus on the next area of growth wherever you can. It's just understanding some of those fundamentals and coming back to it. And maybe you haven't done it over the last year and a half or the 2 years, and that's okay. Now is the time to kind of look at that and go, okay, historically, where have we been? Where are we getting our best return from? And it's like having, I kind of relate it a little bit to, if you're cost controlled, kind of like you have some sensitivity, like a food allergy or something. You don't know what it is until you cut something out of your diet for a little bit. And you're like, okay, symptoms went away. It's that thing, right? And you might want to do that. Okay, we're spending a lot on LinkedIn ads. Is it working for us? I don't know. Cut the LinkedIn ads off and see how you do, or reduce that spend a little bit and see how it is. Your gut feel, most people's gut feel is probably close to right. So start with a gut feel, kind of move from there, use some data with it, but kind of build that. But it's human nature to do that. And I don't fault anyone for it. It's just a matter of, okay, now times are a little bit wonky. What do we do to adapt? And I think that's where, right, I kind of mentioned email before, but think about how all these channels interact with one another. So if I'm, on Facebook or Instagram, I see something, I click over. Are we tracking that to see, okay, I get a lot of clicks, but not a lot of conversions there. What do we do there? Well, can we use, if you're on the website, email, we talk about browse abandonment. So low cost, can I capture that? Can I capture the email address when that person comes over, or their mobile number for SMS marketing? And I can retarget them at a much lower cost and see if I can convert them that way. And you focus on one thing that helps feed the other, and hopefully you reduce the cost in the meantime, but also increase your marketing efficiency.
I wanted to dig deeper here as well, because I don't see so many. Maybe in States that's different, but in Europe, I don't see so many people using email as a tool, except like, obviously when you do the purchase, you stay and you get some newsletters or stuff like this. But like, I haven't seen much good results on my email account. Though I rarely saw interesting offers or interesting stuff that's sent by the merchant my way. And I'm curious to know if this is my thing, that I am not on many lists, or these lists are not great, in terms of, if we are speaking of merchants, and also not much cart abandonment. I was buying recently like a custom-made, bookshelf that you could, customize every centimeter. They were chasing me for abandoned cart, and this is so rare that I'm not seeing this so much. So I'm curious, why is this the case where you can revive these baskets and it's not being done? So I wonder, what are the challenges here?
Okay, did you buy from that retailer that was sending you the abandoned cart messages?
I bought, but different thing from a basket. So I did, because I wanted that stuff. So look, it was like an accident, but never mind. But I bought, but they were diligent in reviving the basket that I haven't bought. If you know what I mean.
I'll get into a whole bunch of metrics and numbers for you here, kind of as benchmarks. Why they're not doing it, I don't know. We have this terminology as like close to cash. When you got something in your cart, you're close to cash, right? That person's going to spend money. It's just a matter of where they're spending it, you or someone else. I mean, in your case, if you've got a customized product, you've got to be sending shopping. Look at all the effort you did. It's like you got to measure it. You've got to, height, width, length. You got to make sure the books fit on there. You got to be precise. That is someone who's buying a bookshelf, bar none. Like they are getting it. So I'll drop some benchmarks, and then we can kind of talk through why people aren't doing it and kind of how to make them more effective a little, from a optimization standpoint. So I mentioned email automation before, and this is really where I think it can supplement and help connect those different marketing channels, paid ads or whatever. So automated messages. So OmniSend last year, we sent 26 billion marketing messages last year. So it's a lot of messages. So out of those, 37% of all email orders came from automated messages. 26 billion messages. Those messages accounted for 2% of a send. So you think about 2% of those 26 billion messages drove 37% of the email sales. It's completely outweighed. The reason is pretty simple. They're relevant messages. They're based on user behavior. So I sign up for an email program, I get something. A lot of times retailers will discount that, so people will sign up to get the discount. But it's an intent signal that there's a signal that they're going to purchase. Browse abandonment, product abandonment, right? These are things where I'm on your website, I'm checking something out, and then I leave. It's most people, online window shoppers. We can target them with a message that's relevant to what they're looking at. So again, intent signal, but targeted and very relevant. And then cart abandonment is pretty obvious, right? So I've identified what I'm going to buy. It's just a matter of where I'm buying it. So we should be, so those three make up the majority, over 80% of all automated email orders. So if you're a brand, you're a services company, you're a B2B company, all those tactics still apply. But at the end of the day, it's about relevance. Are the messages relevant to you? So you mentioned, you give the example before, hey, we send emails, we don't really see a lot of return on them. I would say, are the emails what your customers are looking for, right? So a lot of retailers would just send blast and blast messages. It's the common approach. It's going to be relevant for some. It's not going to be relevant for most because they're shotgunned out. Those automated messages target individuals based on user behavior. They're automatically relevant because the content is based on what they're doing, which is guide that journey, and it's focused on that relevance. If you're a retailer, cart abandonments, you got to have to have it, right? But the other two, I would focus on. Those are the key three, right? We talk about, what are your pillars? Welcome messages, product abandonment, cart abandonment. And then from there, you can move on to other things like post-purchase. Those, I don't even know what to say with them. Like those are the three I would do. It applies to B2B as well, right? So we think about, again, we want to capture that email address. How do we capture the email address if we're a services company? Maybe we have, email services like optimization, agency services. We have SEO services, and we have, pick something else, right? Paid ads services, right? If someone lands from a LinkedIn ad or a Meta ad over to the SEO services, we know they're interested in SEO, and maybe we have a different pop-up only for those SEO people, probably send some sort of ebook or, free consult or something. But we capture them, we can tag them with SEO, and now we can start to retarget them, right? We can send them a welcome series based on our SEO services. And then we subtly call out the other things, right? Need help with paid ads? We also have that. But we target that around what they're interested in and what we've generated there. And hopefully, right, we think about abandoned cart. Well, you don't just put SEO services into a cart and you abandon it, but treat your product abandonment or those browse abandonment messages as a shopping cart abandonment, right? Give them service, promote your value, tell them all the benefits that you offer. So we can apply these tactics, D2C, B2B, whatever you want. They all apply the same. It's just a matter of the content we're putting in there, right? Information versus product and stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because one of my questions was okay, how we can apply what you described in cart abandonment and all of the email automation around a service company. Let's say web development agency like us, and you did the SIG, you explained. Now I have one question less, but I would like to know. But because again, one of the question was, okay, you can't do marketing automation without having customer emails, and how you do this, like how you extract these emails from the behavior there are the legendary, like lead magnets and gated content. You leave an email and get to know what's the case study. On the other hand, I read a lot of criticism against, if your case study is not accessible, this is a huge barrier if you have to leave your email. And, LLMs won't crawl it or won't, you won't be able to share it with the bots on a broader scale. It's a downside now, maybe, because such a content won't be, maybe you won't get traffic served, from LLM to your website, because the LLM will, analyze it and give the context answer somewhere else, and you will not benefit it. You will be the donor of the information only, and this is not good for you. So it's hard to balance that, but the question remains how you extract these emails from your traffic.
Yeah, you're right. It's really hard to balance that. My general approach to things, I like ungated content. I think you gave a good example, customer success story. Is if I'm shopping for a product and you're like, hey, a service, and you're like, hey, see how we help this client. By the way, you can't see it unless we do something. Like they're on your website. They're there for a reason. So I like ungated content for that reason. Get them the information as much as you can. I think that's an indication where how do we capture the email address if we're keeping everything open and available for them? Well, I think about some of those other things we could do. One, we can just call it out and test it and be like, hey, yeah, I don't know, maybe you can still offer a discount if you want 10% off, the first, month of contract or whatever, but that's kind of further down the road. Think about, do you have a piece of content where we can give them the case study for free, but there's a piece of content that's kind of like an addendum that you don't need to have as part of the case study, but would help provide value for this. So I don't know, right? We'll just use SEO as a services example, but hey, how we help them rank their top 5 keywords on page 1, top couple of results, whatever it might be. Here's the case study for it. By the way, here is the 10-point checklist that we used that for them to monitor and evaluate all their future, blog posts or SEO written content. And that's the email. That's the gated part. So you don't need it to be the success part of it, but it's an addendum. And maybe that's something that they can print out, they can tack up, or they can always reference, and it's nicely branded with your name on it. All right. So it provides some sort of value there. So that's how I would initially look at it. And then you can kind of dig deeper down. Okay, maybe there's one or two that we want to gate because we know they're really popular. They're a huge brand name. And those are the ones we can kind of drive that off of. But I would look for some of that other additional content where you might be able to provide a checklist or some sort of other addendum to it while still making the initial thing available and accessible. And if you do that, obviously you can get some of those email addresses in, see how it works for you. You can always refine and things as you go. But that's an instance where if we get the email address, then we can start retargeting. We can start, marketing our product positioning and our props and things like that. So it's an example, not a bulletproof solution, but it's how I would and take my initial approach to it. And kind of, again, you throw it at a wall, see what sticks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Unless you test, there's, very little you can do to like envision what will happen until you test. In fact, I'm curious. What do you see that is migrating from consumer websites into B2B space? Do you see any trends? Like there's a trend of D2C where, for example, we are observing a lot of manufacturers we work with open part of their product range to for direct sale via e-commerce platform. So not everything, not to make their distribution channel too angry, but part of their product offering is certainly going to be available via their own platform. And this happened, we started to observe this a while ago, I would say a couple of years ago. I'm curious if you see anything else that, B2B organizations are taking from, like consumer apps, shops, websites, anything like this you can see.
Yeah, great question, because we've been kind of seeing this transformation, I would say, over the past 10 years, and it's been really slow. And I'll probably say, like, your time frame last couple of years, I think is when it's kind of accelerated a little bit more. We've slowly become a very visual. We've always been a visual society, but our online lives have become a lot more visual. One, because the nature of the internet, but two, it's just social media just trickling down into our everyday. So, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, like they're visual based. Even Meta now is, or I say Meta, Facebook is becoming a lot more visual based versus text based. That stuff feeds down into your everyday psyche for it. And I think the one thing we're seeing, obviously, like browse abandonment type emails, look at 5 years ago, very few B2B brands were doing those things. 10 years ago, almost none, right? Cart abandonment, mostly in the B2B space. I would see it with conferences, like registration type stuff. Hey, you almost registered for XYZ conference. Let us help you finish off that registration. So we see a lot more B2B now with, quote unquote cart abandonment, if they have any sort of cart. But you get close to doing whatever. The cart abandonment could be, filling out a lead magnet page, right? So it's kind of like browse abandonment there. But hey, you almost downloaded the white paper, stuff like that. So the big thing I'm seeing, to answer the question, is the visual nature of emails filter into the B2B world. So, traditionally, those B2B emails would be very newsletter oriented, a lot of text, maybe some stories. You can still have those things, but it's mostly the visual cues. And then you can click on the visual to get to the landing page where you can read more about it. So, capturing images, maybe a headline, maybe one sentence or two that kind of explains it, kind of like you would get like a news digest every day. Those are the things we're starting to seeing it a lot, but B2B companies start to shift to. Make it visual, let you scan it quickly. The other component to that is many of those, B2B emails used to be a lot about, hey, let us tell you about our company, our product releases, our improvements, great things we're doing. It's transferred to a very much a me society, right? So what that means is we can still tell you those things, but we need to tell it in a way of how it's going to help you, right? It's the proverbial what's in it for me. B2B needs to start doing that. And we could do that in a visual society, in a visual, kind of aesthetically pleasing email. But it's going to be very much like, hey, did you know you can save 15 minutes by doing, by doing this because of our new product release, right? So we show them how to use the product more. We show them how they can save XYZ, money, time, efficiency, manpower, whatever it is. So those two things are the things that have really trickled down from a D2C world into a B2B world. It's very visual, aesthetically pleasing emails, a lot less text, and then the what's in it for me, right? So we make it less about the company, more about the actual recipient of it. And those are the two things that we've really seen pronounced.
Okay. Because these type of like very B2B kind of emails, they tend to be famous for, I think, at least speaking about 20 years of experience no one cares about, or stuff like this. So, that there is that zero was in it for me. And I think, or maybe that's only my, social media bubble. I hear so much about, the end customer or end user, or, the other party. What's in it for me? What's the benefit for me? Like, I can't think how can someone say we've got 20 years of experience and we do this, then this. Like, zero relevancy, like nothing from.
So this is one of the best practices from a D2C world that has shifted over the years. I still have debates about this over coffee or soda or whatever, but welcome series used to sign up for brands emails, and the first message would be like, oh, thanks for joining our community. They tell you the brand story behind it, and I was like, hey, we're going to email you this many times a week. They're signing up because they're interested in, we talked about intent before. They're interested in shopping. And that first message is always about, let me tell you about the brand, because that's how I'm going to build a connection with you. And I'm telling you now, like, don't do that, right? You can have a little maybe image and link somewhere, but they're signing up because they want to shop, right? They don't care. I tell people, I'm like, they don't care. They don't care. Like, those are value adds. They're not the reason they signed up. And it's very much like that in the B2B world, because you mentioned like 20 years of experience, no one cares, right? How are you going to help me? So, it kind of put an example, like we talked about customer success stories or case studies before. So, yeah, this is pretty common that a business will send their customers like, hey, new case study out. Look how we helped XYZ brand cut down their expenses by 20% or their manufacturing time by 10%. And I'm like, okay, so you want me to read? Like, there's a different way to frame that. Like, why am I going to spend 5 minutes reading this when I'm already a customer, right? There's a different way to frame that. Hey, can you segment your audience to people that maybe have the same challenge? Because you probably have a CRM that captures this data in some fashion, even just a tag and an email provider. Can I send those people and frame it around them? Hey, we know you have this challenge. We just help them do this. How can we do that? Like, there's a different way to frame that success story to be about them rather than being like, hey, look what we did for this company. You want to frame that around like, hey, let us help you do this. And by the way, here's proof that we can do that for you, right? We initiate that conversation that way. So sometimes it's just about where you frame the words and, the visuals versus redefining your
Mhm.
entire program.
That's very interesting because you mentioned that you can segment your audience and send, the next step is you send a different version or totally different version of a given message, the given email. Maybe this is the same thing that should happen on the website as well, where you have adaptive content, and provided you have enough information on your visitor, you can phrase things differently on the website. These case studies. Probably the biggest challenge is how to get that information ahead of that person visiting the case study page or listing of case studies. Because with email you have part of the information. You saw where that person visited, which parts of the website were visited. So that would be difficult. But with my long rant, maybe not rant, but an intro, I would like to ask you, what can you get out of a suite of tools, or can you share with our listeners more about that segmentation, or rather, good features of proper email, properly owning the email tool, whether this is for newsletter or automation.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back just real quick. So your long
Please do,
tangents
yeah.
are like half the length of mine. So you're good. So I'm going to go
Okay.
back real quick to what you were saying about having customizable web content. So think about it even just from a landing page standpoint. So you've got an ad on XYZ platform. They click over. The ad is obviously targeting something very specific, SEO, manufacturing, whatever it is. You could have that landing page customizable, but maybe it's generic, but maybe the pop-up. So we go back to capturing the email address. Maybe the pop-up is something that says like, hey, what is your biggest challenge? And you have a couple options there. And let us send you something to help you, evaluate challenges or providers or whatever it might be. So you just ask them, like, what's your biggest challenge? By the way, we got something. We'll just make it easy for you. We'll send you some stuff based on your challenge. So it's an easy way to kind of maybe test out a different way to collect email addresses. But that also might bring it back to the question you just asked. Hey, what do we look for in a provider that's going to help us? And I think, a lot of providers now offer the same suite of tools. So unless you're trying to go, I say really cheap, but like a lot of providers will have free plans as well. OmniSend's one of them, but they offer a very similar suite of tools. So I think it's just a matter of pricing, understanding the features you're actually going to use, because like, hey, we could spend a little bit more and we'll get these 50 extra features. And if you're not using those 50 features, you're paying more for the same thing, right? So I think it's understanding your capabilities, Segmentation is a really good one because I always tell people segmentation can be very simplistic and it can also be very complex and hard to scale and hard to manage. It depends on how you want to use it. So, I think if you're looking for a provider, make sure the segmentation's robust. Obviously, we live in an AI world. So if you're unfamiliar or maybe less nuanced with creating segments and all the different nuanced rules, maybe look for a tool that has AI built into it where you can have conversational, hey, build me a segment for people with XYZ. And it suggests and then creates that segment for you, right? It makes it easier for you. I think so. When you're looking at tools and providers, I think you look for the things you want to do, the things you can realistically do, and make sure those things match. And then you can start evaluating prices, features, usability, UI, UX, stuff like that. When we look at segmentation, I would look at, okay, when we have a pop-up and we capture that information, that user, can we define them to a segment right there? And that could be checkboxes. It could just be tags on the pop-up form, stuff like that. Can you use different pop-up forms at the same time for different pages based on source codes or UTMs or whatever, right? Those things will kind of be important for B2B people. Most providers will have those functions built into them already. So, but those are like small checks you should do. And then for segments, from a business standpoint, understand what the problem you are solving is. So if you're an agency and you've got 3 services, okay, you've got 3 services, but what is the problem that we are filling or meeting with those services, and really break it down, because then it allows you to segment a little bit better. And it doesn't need to be really complex, but it allows you to target a little bit better. So yeah, you know, we've got consulting services for people with manufacturers. We deal with manufacturers. So, okay, what are the manufacturers' biggest problems? And what are we actually solving? Are we solving a time issue? Are we solving a staffing issue? Are we solving a knowledge issue? Are we solving a pricing issue? And that's where you want to hone at. And those will help build your segments. Okay, we're gonna solve a time and staffing issue. What content do we have for this? How can we easily tag these people when they come in or tag current customers with it? And then we just build a segment. Okay, here's my manufacturing time savings segment. What content? And that gives you an idea when you send emails. Sometimes it's not about sending 10 versions of the message. Sometimes it's just not about sending that one message to that one group where the content's not relevant. And that segment just becomes a suppression segment for you for that send.
Yeah, because they will churn or sign out.
Yeah. Does that answer the question you were asking, Maciek?
Yes, and I want more, because segmentation is only part of that, right? And no, I'm trying to understand. For example, if someone doesn't have it, like where do you even start? Because obviously you start by collecting emails, right? You've got something, we talked about this previously, that you collect this gated content, not gated content, something in exchange for your email. But then what? How do you think about growing that muscle of email channel? Because okay, you can have a newsletter, build your own personal thing, your own personal brand. But this is for creators, for someone, any individual. But if you are a business, how do you do this in a systematic way?
Yeah, so there's kind of 2 sides of this coin, and I'll address, I think, the one you were asking for first, second. So, because there's a lot of complexity to it, and it's not easy. So, if we have everything set up now, right? The goal is obviously to figure out a system to tag new contacts coming in, new customers coming in away. And if we have an understanding of how you want to segment, you can do that. So, hey, I just signed a new customer. What are the services they're paying for, right? And you start tagging those people appropriately. So you can do that moving forward. That's the easier part of things. I think the question you were asking before is, okay, I've got a bunch of customers. I don't have a segmentation strategy. How do I go back and retroactively tag these people into the appropriate segments? The answer is that it's not necessarily easy to do, but it's not impossible. And I think sometimes you have to be a little creative, and sometimes it's going to take a little bit of manual work. So it's a little bit easier. Okay, here's how I start. Top, high level, waterfall your way down. So, okay, we have 3 offerings, X, Y, Z. Okay, let's how do we define who's an X, who's a Y? And you just start with that high level tag. Okay, let's move these people to manufacturing. Let's move these people to paid search. Or PPC. Let's move these people to SEO. You got to have, I'm assuming you have some sort of system that lets you know that. If not, you need to create one somehow. How do we do that moving forward, to retroactively get these people in there? Well, one, if you have any sort of criteria in there, so we know where you can build a segment and have them automatically tagged, both in the segment and you could tag them. I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head of how.
No, but I think that's clear because we are digging deeper into segmentation, and I'm curious about more holistic approach to this because obviously segmentation is one very fundamental item, but when you are thinking you don't get into an email suite just to do segmentation. Something has to follow. These emails have to follow.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm thinking about the whole strategy. Let's assume you have a business, but no one was doing any emails, right? So there are no emails except for the existing customers. There's no gated content. There's nothing except current customers. And don't focus on them too much. But you know what I mean. The decision comes. The company wants to implement that email suite because they heard so much good stuff about it. And
Gotcha.
How can you convey what is that email suite? Why is it good? Or what are the traits of having this channel of marketing operated in a proper way? Reference way. How does the reference way of operating this marketing arm look like? That's what's interesting to me.
Yeah. So good question. I think I understand you a little bit better now too. So sorry about the tangent before.
Sorry, too long tangents on my end. Look, I totally get it.
So I kind of alluded to different pieces of this before, but I'll try to kind of level set here. So initially, our data will tell you email. We break these down 68 to 1 return on ad spend. So your ROI on it. Some of that's going to be a lot, obviously T2C, so a little bit different than B2B. But here's how I look at it. Email is a first party channel. It's them giving you consent to email. So that's step one. And holistically, how I look at that is, okay, paid ads certainly work. The cost, the performance fluctuate from time to time. Email is consistent. I pay XYZ a month and that's it, right? You don't have those costs. So that's how I look at it initially. Now, if I have a controlled cost, this goes to your question. How do I holistically make this work with these other channels and also make it an engine of its own? This is where those 3 automations I talked about come in, because if we can automate things out, let the automation do the heavy lifting of my answer for this, right? So use the automation where it can, and then your scheduled messages should fill in gaps, right? So we want to follow intent, we want to follow journey, we want to follow engagement, even if they're customers. If they're engaging in something, we want to kind of follow that and keep feeding them. So if we know from PPC standpoint, they are coming in from XYZ source, of course, we can tag that, right? We can send them those automated messages to feed them down that whatever content that we've used to generate them. That's going to feed them. Let's talk about the other side. So scheduled messages, I've got customers, I've got non-customers who are also signed up, maybe prospects. Some are hot, some are warm, some are cold. And I've got this list. Now, what do I do to target these people? So this is, again, where you have a little bit of that segmentation strategy. Again, if nothing else, suppression, right? So you got to figure out just what your emails are going to look like, how often you want to send. If you're a B2B company, you don't need to be sending 3 times a week like a retailer. Maybe it's once a week, once every 2 weeks based on your business and your customers. Make those emails useful for them. The one thing you can realistically do here, it's not a foolproof science, but if you're looking at either segmenting for short-term engagement or just, I've got this list, I don't have them segmented, I got to figure out what they're engaged with, right? You can create some sort of automation that's click-based. So, hey, I'm going to send this email out on a Tuesday. It's going to go to everyone. It's going to be on XYZ topic. I'm going to make it aesthetically pleasing and But say you've got a navigation bar up top, or maybe you just have 3 different call to actions in there. We can create some sort of automation that says, hey, when they click on this message, put them, either tag them with this or send a follow-up message, and you automate that follow-up message, right? And you just want to test the engagement. So if I know I click on whatever, the new webinar coming up that you're promoting, well, that's my cue that I'm interested in, one, that topic, but two, that maybe that type of content. And then we can send an automated follow-up message 2 days later if they didn't, sign up or something. And just, again, remind them of that webinar, but also have links to previous webinars or on-demand ones or whatever. So it's just an example of ways we can start kind of automating some of these things as a test to try to figure out what sticks. And then you can start segmenting those a little bit. And then when you're ready to send, say your cadence is 1 message every 2 weeks, you've got your 3 audiences, and you build a message that is mostly based on what you're most likely interested in. And you just schedule it off to them, right? And see how it goes. And if the engagement's really bad, you figure out, okay, is the engagement bad because of the topic? Is it timing? Are we sending too much? This is where look at an unsubscribe rates, or how, you're always going to get unsubscribes. Is it accelerating? And if it's really high in spikes, either the content's off or you're sending too much. And so if you're a B2B company, I look at it a little bit different than a D2C company, where D2C, I'm trying to sell something, I got a sweater, I got something, I want you to buy it today. The B2B is more about engagement and getting cold customers or cold leads warmer, and just, again, reinforcing the value here. So you don't need to send once a week. You don't need to send even once every 2 weeks if that's not your business model and not your strategy. But it's about engagement. The goal is to get the clicks, to get, opens are one thing, but you want to get the clicks. You want to get people driving to your website. And that's how I start. If you're not getting the clicks, you're not
Something's wrong, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it just might be, maybe you got this email, they were a cold lead or a warm lead 12 months ago. Now they're not, right? And maybe they're still, and if they're opening, well, there's some indication there, right? So maybe you're in the back of their mind, you're living rent-free back there, but maybe it's just an indication they're not quite ready yet. And, pay attention to those things. So filter down your engaged versus non-engaged contacts too. So you don't want to send to everyone every single time, right? If you're just kicking up your email program and you send 5 messages, right? Start slow, but if you start sending 5 messages, you got this pool that hasn't opened any of them, kind of pull them out, send them instead of once every 2 weeks, maybe they get one every 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and figure out if they're coming back to life or they're dead. And if they're dead, there's no point of sending an email to someone who's not even opening it. No point. It's going to ruin your deliverability. Just let them go. But you have those email addresses. Now you can use those email addresses to maybe retarget on some paid social, because emails maybe not their jam anymore, or they don't check it as much, or you're starting to go to spam, or they forgot about you. So you can always test those on paid social, paid retargeting, and see if you can get them back to life there. And if they come back to life there, they'll pop back into your active emails, and then they'll move over to that healthy thing. So it's not a great answer for you, Maciek, but it's kind of taking it from a slow approach and just being like, okay, let's start very high level with it and filter down.
I think, when you start doing this, there's so much stuff you can do. Like, you mentioned you get back to the segmentation, and I see this as a core functionality on top of which you build different strategies. Like, you build different content for different segments, and unless you do that segmentation, you have one segment, right? Everyone, I call it everyone. And then, based on the behavior, you can derive from that these new segments. And when you have this, when you are getting a little bit more visibility into your list, you see patterns, you see segments, and then there's even more work to validate these, if these are correct segments, and different offering for them, retargeting. Like, it's like a tree that that has only more and more branches you can follow.
Yeah.
And that advice starts slow. I think there is no other advice. Like, thinking about this, there's nearly no other advice, because you will get buried in optionality, and nothing will happen, or what will happen will be done, unless you start slowly embrace the tool and the whole concept of what you are doing within this arm of marketing?
Yeah, and I'll say two things here as well. So one, every business, I neglected to say this before, but every business should have just, if you're starting or starting slow, two segments, customers, non-customers, right? And then you want to see how those two emails perform independently of one another. That's going to give you a really strong indication about, am I feeding the right type of content to my customers? And then does this content resonate at all with non-customers? And some of those email addresses are probably dead or whatever, so you're going to get non-openers. But two segments to start: customers, non-customers. Everyone should kind of have that info. Second side, right, is B2B is got to be a little more careful. I think careful might not be the right word, but maybe you have less flexibility than a brand selling a product, because, right, I get batch and blast messages all day long, and I might have bought sneakers. I might like this brand because I bought something for my wife. I'm not interested in most things, but you have a little more leeway because I might have not bought a sweater before. I'm still a dude who wears a sweater or am giving gifts, right? So the products are always relevant to something, but if they're not, like, people tend to be forgiving of D2C brands. In a way, they're not, maybe not as forgiving with B2B. It's like, I don't care about this, right? And then it's easier to tune those off. So that's where I say, splitting customers and non-customers is a really good indication of that, because it allows you to a little more easily see whether the content you're delivering is actually helpful, because you do have, I think, a little bit less leeway than you do as a brand selling a product.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I like leaving this topic for a while. I wonder if, because you also mentioned, AI tools that can be embedded in these suites, and I'm curious, do you see any tools that are interrupting the flow, or flow of messages, or making it harder to get to people, or anything? Like, I'm looking for any negative behavior or negative results because of these tools emerging. And to give you an example of what I'm looking for is the AI overlay in Google search results, which is a negative factor for the websites because they are stripping from the part of the traffic, So for them, or maybe rising load on the websites because of the bots or that crawl all the time the new websites, right? So we see this as well, that AI bots, not only regular bots, but now AI bots are crawling our customers' websites more and more heavily, which puts a strain on the server. The website gets slower, and and this is not optimal. So I'm thinking if there is anything like this you are observing in your world of email marketing.
Yeah, I would say it's impacting email less so from a negative standpoint, right? So the benefit we're seeing from AI is mostly tool built stuff. So it's stuff integrated with the tools that can help you write your email copy. It can write your subject line for you. So it helps
Obviously.
with the production side. It speeds up the production side, which helps, smaller companies that are maybe more pressed, or even mid-sized companies that just want a second, like, different perspective of things. So I think from an email side, that's where it's impacting more. I think the really interesting part is kind of what you mentioned. It's the non-email side of things. It's the customer journey. So, I'm looking at specifically like Perplexity. GPT is obviously the big one, but Perplexity has really got some cool stuff going on. And from a D2C standpoint, I'm looking a lot up with like agentic AI and e-commerce shopping agents. I think it's a really interesting and really quickly developing area. But you think about it from a B2B standpoint, if I'm a consumer and I'm looking for a new product or a new vendor, what am I doing? Right. So traditionally you go to Google and be like, okay, you know, manufacturing agencies, or, supply chain or SEO agencies, right? You type in like best SEO agencies, maybe under a budget. You get this pool, some paid ads, and a bunch of listicles that you're going to. And now people are going to ChatGPT. What are the 10 best SEO agencies? But they're being more conversational. They're setting budgets on there for under 2,000 a month or 1,000 a month, brands need to make sure they're in that conversation. They've got those other variables where like brands don't want to put their pricing on there, right? So they've got calculators, and pricing is not a one size fits all. Typically, there's services and there's add-ons and integration costs and stuff like that. But I think that's where the complexity is coming in. Complexity is doing stuff with booking travel and stuff now, but being a lot more conversational between image searches, like image results, just like Google. Like they've announced they're kind of going after Google, but they've got a shopping tab, they've got an images tab, they've got a search tab, right? And I think the off email stuff is where the bigger kind of disruption to the traditional customer journey comes in. So from a brand standpoint, how do you optimize to be in that list of results that comes up? And then how do you do it in a way where you don't get disqualified because you're over optimizing for those results? Like, okay, we're best for under 10,000, but you also service $20,000 clients, right? Are you left out of both of those? Are you included in one but not the other? This is kind of the area that I see unfolding quickly from a B2B and a D2C standpoint, that people are trying to navigate. We talk about tariffs disrupting things, right? People are trying to navigate this stuff right now too, and there's no really clean-cut answer about like, okay, how do we do this in a way that's going to set us up for the long-term success? It's kind of trial by fire and play it by ear and see how it goes.
And there's, to your point, there's more and more tools that are focused only on discoverability via LLMs, like Perplexity, ChatGPT, Gemini. There's a lot of tools that are centered around like, there's Ahrefs that was built to monitor your keywords. Now, there are clones of Ahref that only analyze the traffic from LLMs. Like this tool, but taken to LLMs. And like they're like growing like crazy, clone after clone, just for that one thing of how am I ranking within LLMs with my brand?
Yeah, and I think this is where like product reviews, right? Obviously big for products, but I think reviews on things like G2 and for business reviews, super important here because, right, what if I'm searching for something, like give me the top rated. Well, top rated might be listicle and might be SEO driven, or it could be a huge factor of the results based on online reviews of that company. So, if I've got, I don't know, 2 reviews, one's a 5-star and one's a 1-star, I'm going to settle up at a 3-star review. And I was like, oh, this brand's got 3 stars, or this company has 3 stars. Right. And it's because the focus wasn't on generating reviews before. It was just kind of like, okay, someone was mad and someone loved us and boom, we got there. And I think collecting reviews on business sites is going to be really important in these factors. I think the other thing comes in, is probably a little further down the road, is like what happens when these things all kind of coalesce, right? Google is building a shopping agent. Amazon has a shopping agent. Perplexity is building and has a shopping agent. Walmart is going to build a shopping agent. What happens to the ecosystem at that point? Like, how does a brand fit into that? And is it going to be like, okay, I've got to pay to be included in Perplexity, but left out of this one? Or like, I kind of see this thing going kind of like search went, right? It's pay to play at some point because it's going to be a limited ecosystem there. That's the one thing we don't really know yet, is how it's all going to settle. Are they going to be 100 different players, or they can be like 3 different players, right, that dominate, and the other ones just kind of filter in. But I think product reviews, like brand reviews, I think are going to be big in this factor because, like, I'm part of that refinement. If I'm on ChatGPT, I'm like, okay, give me the best 10 agencies for XYZ. I get this list of 10. Okay, eliminate anything that's under 3 stars or has a lot of recent negative reviews. What are the pros and cons of these? And you've got to factor in, like, you've got to use the experience as a consumer shopping for to figure out how you need to optimize to get the results you want to get.
And that's something that you would do either way when filtering out, I don't know, restaurants on Google Maps,
Yes.
right? You do this either way, right? So
100%. Yeah.
When thinking about G2, what I would fear or controversy about Trustpilot as another platform which collects reviews is that, I don't know how to put it, but they tend to be skewed. Like with any open platform with reviews, people tend to pay for reviews, for example, right? So it's like maybe this somehow transpires to the LLM somehow that these reviews are skewed, or maybe there's competition that is doing the opposite thing for their competition. What I heard is, for example, Reddit, a good source of truth because this is so unfiltered, but again, not as easily, like you can't match it as easily as on a platform review made for reviews for different campaigns. It's like perfect example of digestible data for LLM for analysis, right? So, but yeah, and maybe to your point, further to your point is that maybe we'll see more independent platforms with reviews for different things. Hard maybe to imagine this with such giants as Trustpilot and G2, but maybe because of that necessity and us with the AI keywords observability platforms, maybe this is what will happen with more smaller platforms, but more trustworthy, less huge. I don't know, like my wide thinking here about the future, what can happen, but we'll see.
So I think brands, like companies, already started to look at this. So I don't know if it's related or not. My guess is it is related, but you look at a major brand like Shopify, which just recently, about a month ago, they deleted a whole bunch of reviews that were outdated and predated the time. Like they're pretty good at cracking down and having very specific guidelines for brands to get reviews now. But back in the day, I say back in the day, it was only a few years ago, but brands were kind of manipulating those in different ways, getting people to provide reviews for different reasons and things like this. And Shopify knew it, and and they just cut a whole bunch of reviews. I mean, thousands of reviews for some brands that were either outdated or before they started enforcing those policies. My suspicion is they did that because they know how important reviews are going to be. They want to kind of level the playing field a little bit and be more of a authority source for it. So you're right. I think you might have, like, you could always have an AI agent that deals with nothing but reviews that feeds other LLMs and stuff. So it's interesting. You kind of see these breadcrumbs a little bit. You don't know where they're going, but you kind of see these couple things. You're like, okay, there's a couple there. Where there's smoke, there's fire sometimes. Well, usually there's fire.
Yeah,
Could just be
yes.
smoldering, but there's something there.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting how it plays out for sure.
Mm-hmm. And to wrap up our conversation, what would you like to happen in a year's time? In terms, let's say, to make it a little bit narrow, what would you like to happen in a year's time from in your area, what you are doing on a day-to-day basis within intersection of marketing, email marketing, a little bit of AI? Like, what would you like to happen?
Well, if we take retirement off the table, because I would love to retire, probably not happening in a year though, unless something dramatic happens. But
yeah,
it's a really good question. I don't even know, man. How do I even answer that?
Yeah. Look, I'm not asking what will happen or who will win, the current, table of best LLM for this, but rather what you like to happen. What would be nice thing to happen? That's, let's say, it's happenable, like it can happen, but within your field of expertise, let's say.
I would love to be able to have a firm understanding of how agentic AI fits into the shopping ecosystem for brands and be able to articulately and accurately talk to people about that. It moves so quick. Like there is literally something every single day on agentic AI that rolls out, and it's hard to keep up with. And at some point, it's kind of going to settle down a bit, but still be like we're a few years away at least from like once you get it working, consumers need to then adopt it and trust it, and it's got to work perfectly. Otherwise, adoption slows, but at some point, it's going to uptick. That's going to take time. It's just consumer behavior. It does with everything. But at some point, you might see that hockey stick. But a year from now, I'd love to be able to look at these and be like, okay, I know offhand Perplexity does X, Y, Z, and ABC, and they're testing this, and Google is doing this, and Apple is doing this, and Meta is doing this. I think Meta's one to watch out for here. And look at all these things and be able to just ramble that off the top of my head and talk about it as articulately as I can about email. I would love for that to happen. I think it's probably going to be a challenge, but I would love for that to happen.
Beautiful answer. I liked it. All right, Greg, it was a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And I hope our paths will cross one day, in I don't know, on a conference, WordCamp, whatever, Shop Talk. We'll see. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome, Jack. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation today. This was fun.
If you like what you've just heard, don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. On the other hand, if you've got a question we haven't answered yet, feel free to reach out to us directly. Just go to awesomestudio.com/contact. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next episode of the Awesome to Know podcast.